The artificial rage was gone, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. "You downtown cats never learn, do you?" he said. "You think you can walk into my city, build a cage, lock the door, and catch the lion sleeping?" Sterling stumbled backward, his polished shoes slipping through spilled coffee. His hands rose higher as tears filled his eyes. "Mr. Johnson, I swear I was just following orders," Sterling whispered. "They made me do it." "Men who follow orders into a graveyard usually end up staying there," Bumpy replied. He stared at Sterling without blinking. "But you're lucky tonight. You're a pawn, and I don't waste ammunition on pawns when there are kings hiding in the kitchen." Click, click. The sound of Bumpy's twin thumb safeties being disengaged echoed through the silent dining room. His smile widened slightly. "Now that the lady has left the room," he said, "let's see what's on the menu." Sterling finally broke. With a strangled cry, he turned and ran for the mahogany bar. He threw himself over the counter, crashing into shelves of expensive liquor. Bottles shattered across the floor, sending glass and spirits everywhere. He curled beneath the bar, trembling and covering his face. Bumpy ignored him. His attention was fixed on the heavy wooden doors at the back of the restaurant. The civilians had taken cover behind the booths and tables. Sterling was no longer a threat. The front doors were secured. Everything was exactly where Bumpy wanted it. Only 4 armed men remained between him and the kitchen. He took a slow breath. Rushing was for amateurs. Adrenaline made hands shake, narrowed vision, and turned careful men into reckless ones. Bumpy controlled his breathing and began walking down the center aisle. His shoes struck the hardwood floor with slow, deliberate steps. To the terrified civilians hiding nearby, every footstep sounded like the approach of something inevitable. Behind the swinging doors, the 4 hitmen were falling apart. They were experienced muscle from the Brooklyn docks, carrying pump-action 12-gauge shotguns. Heavy winter coats clung to their sweating bodies as they waited in the cramped, grease-stained kitchen. Their plan had been simple. Sterling would create a distraction. The gunman would wait for his signal, burst through the doors, and kill Bumpy before he knew what was happening. Instead, everything had gone wrong. They had heard shouting, furniture breaking, Sterling screaming. Then came the violent slam of the side door, and now, silence. Absolute silence. Carmine, the scar-faced leader, swallowed hard. He looked at his men. Their faces were pale beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. One of the younger gunmen tightened his grip on his shotgun. "What the hell is going on out there?" he whispered. "Why hasn't Sterling given the signal?" "Shut your mouth," Carmine snapped. He moved closer to the narrow gap between the swinging doors and cautiously looked through. The dining room was almost frozen in time. An overturned chair, spilled coffee, broken glass, an abandoned booth. But no Bumpy Johnson. Carmine's stomach tightened. He searched the room again. Nothing. That was worse than seeing him, because you could lose sight of an ordinary man. You did not lose sight of Bumpy Johnson. If the king disappeared from view, there was only one explanation. The king was already hunting. Carmine slowly pulled back from the door. The men exchanged frightened looks. Their carefully planned ambush had become something else entirely. They were no longer waiting for Bumpy to walk into their trap. They were waiting to discover where he would strike first. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, measured, getting closer. One of the gunmen raised his shotgun. Carmine lifted a hand, signaling everyone to hold. The footsteps stopped. For one terrifying second, there was silence again. Then the swinging kitchen doors began to move. Carmine's eyes widened. Bumpy had reached them. And now the hunters finally understood the truth. They had never been setting a trap for the king. They had been locking themselves inside a room with him.
Nothing had happened. Then he looked toward the mahogany bar. "Sterling." His voice was calm now, almost conversational. Slowly, the terrified manager lifted his head above the brass rail. He looked as though the last few minutes had aged him 20 years. "Yes, Mr. Johnson," Sterling whispered. "Unlock the front doors. Let these people go home." Sterling nodded rapidly. "And when the police arrive," Bumpy continued, "you tell them a couple of downtown boys had a disagreement in the kitchen. You tell them it got out of hand. Tell them I paid my tab and left before the trouble started." He paused. "Do we understand each other?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely." "You were never here." Sterling swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Good man. Bumpy turned toward the front doors. The civilians remained frozen in their booths, watching him with a mixture of fear and awe. Bumpy didn't stop to explain anything. He had already done what mattered most. He had survived, and he had protected the people caught in the middle. Behind him, Sterling scrambled out from behind the ruined bar. His hands shook violently as he gathered the brass keys. He ran across the broken glass, reached the front doors, and unlocked the massive padlock. The heavy bolts slid free, then the doors swung open. A blast of bitter Harlem winter air rushed into the destroyed club, sweeping away the smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Bumpy stepped outside. The freezing air hit his face like a clean, cold shower. He breathed deeply, letting the winter night wash away the tension of the last few minutes. Half a block away, a black 1961 Lincoln Continental waited at the curb, its exhaust rising in thick white clouds. Standing beside the open rear door was Junie Bird. He hadn't moved. He hadn't drawn a weapon. He had simply waited. When Bumpy emerged from the shadows, Junie gave him a slow, respectful nod. Bumpy walked toward the car, pulling the collar of his cashmere coat tighter against the wind. Then he stopped. His eyes moved toward the narrow alley beside the velvet room. Sarah, the young waitress, was huddled against the brick wall. She was shivering violently, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, waiting for the police, or perhaps simply waiting for the nightmare to end. Bumpy watched her for a moment. Then he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a thick roll of $100 bills. He handed it to Junie. Junie immediately understood. He walked across the street, entered the alley, and placed the money into Sarah's trembling hands. He said nothing. He simply nodded once and returned to the Lincoln. Sarah stared down at the enormous roll of cash. It was enough to keep her family warm for years, enough to give her a chance to walk away from places where frightened young women were forced to serve dangerous men. Bumpy climbed into the warm back seat. The interior smelled of fine leather and bay rum. After the cold and violence outside, the car felt almost like another world. Junie closed the door, walked around to the driver's seat, and started the engine. The Lincoln pulled smoothly away from the curb. Behind them, the velvet room disappeared into the darkness, its shattered windows and smoking interior fading into the distance. Bumpy leaned back against the leather headrest and watched Harlem pass through the frosted window. Neon signs blurred across the glass. The streets were nearly empty. The city was cold, but it was still his city. Bumpy glanced down at his gold watch. 10:30. He had time. Mamie was waiting for him at home. Despite everything that had happened, he intended to keep his promise. Bumpy settled deeper into the seat. "Take us home, Junie," he said quietly. "The weather's getting a little too rough out here." Junie didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply kept driving. The black Lincoln disappeared into the freezing Harlem night, carrying its passenger home while the violence, the bodies, and the shattered plans of the downtown syndicate were left behind. Bumpy Johnson had walked into the velvet room surrounded by danger. He walked out with the city still under his command, and before midnight he intended to be home with the woman waiting for him.